Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Virgin Mary, a Very Short Introduction by Mary Joan Winn Leith. Narrated by Alison Ewing. Publisher's note: in this audio edition, you will hear references to figures present in the print and ebook formats of the book. Author's note: the author grew up Protestant, but while respectful of religious sensitivities, writes here as a historian, applying the rules of evidence to the topic of the Virgin Mary. Bible passages are from the New Revised Standard Translation, unless otherwise indicated. Chapter 1. Meeting Mary, the Surprising Virgin. Mary, the mother of Jesus, has a place in the religious consciousness of the 3.8 billion Christians and Muslims who make up more than half the world's population. Muslims and Christians agree on certain basics: that by the power of God, a Jewish virgin named Mary, Mariam in her native Aramaic language, miraculously became pregnant without sexual intercourse and gave birth to Jesus, the prophet, miracle worker, and Messiah. There are, of course, important differences between the Christian and Muslim Mary, and Christians themselves often differ over the Virgin Mary. Her significance and roles have varied considerably, not just today, but over the past 2 millennia of Christianity. A close reading of the New Testament reveals that even Jesus' earliest followers perceived Mary in different ways. All 4 of the New Testament Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, indicate that Jesus' mother was Jewish, lived in the Galilean village of Nazareth, and apparently bore other children besides Jesus. 3 of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, record her name, Mary, Maria or Mariam in Greek, the language of the Gospels. Only Matthew and Luke describe Jesus' miraculous conception by Mary. Only John places Mary at the crucifixion of her son. The other 3 Gospels omit Jesus' mother from their list of women at the crucifixion. In no Gospel is Mary a witness to Jesus' resurrection. If we turn to the very earliest writings about Jesus in the Bible, the letters of the Apostle Paul, we read simply that Jesus was born of a woman. Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. With no hint of a miraculous conception, whereas Paul refers numerous times to Jesus' brothers. If Christian scriptures give varying accounts of Mary, we should hardly be surprised that in the course of 2,000 years, perceptions have evolved, and in various directions. The Virgin Mary may be one of the most famous women in history, but she has also been subject to misunderstandings, unquestioned presuppositions, and misinformation, even among her devotees. A 2013 survey of Americans by the Pew Research Center showed that 73% of Americans believe Jesus was born of a virgin, but anecdotal evidence suggests that most Americans erroneously assume the term Immaculate Conception refers to Mary's virginal conception of Jesus. In fact, the Immaculate Conception is a theological doctrine professed exclusively by Roman Catholics to refer to the moment Mary was conceived in her mother's womb. Furthermore, even in the 21st century, when few would disagree that the Jewish Virgin Mary from Roman-ruled Palestine would have had Mediterranean features, the prevailing stereotype about Mary's appearance is still blonde, as well as humble and submissive. The majority Protestant and Catholic population of Western Europe and the USA also tends to forget the millions of Orthodox Christians on whose icons Mary's hair is hidden under a veil, her eyes dark, her complexion olive, golden, or even black. As for the submissive Mary, since the late 20th century, Catholic liberation theologians have countered that Mary is an eloquent advocate for social justice, a mother resisting an oppressive state. They hear revolution in the words of newly pregnant Mary's song, the Magnificat. Luke, chapter 1, verse 46 to 55. The Lord has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. It may also come as a surprise that the Virgin Mary has been, and continues to be, a religiously divisive figure. For example, given her indisputable Jewishness, it is a tragic irony that the enormously popular medieval stories about Mary's miracles are riddled with anti-Judaism. In the 16th century, as the Protestant Reformation spread across Europe, the Virgin became a flashpoint for intra-Christian polemics. To Protestants, Catholic veneration of the Virgin looked like idolatry and a perversion of the Bible's portrayal of Mary as a normal human. Despite reformer Martin Luther's lifelong Marian devotion, Mary essentially disappeared from Protestant theology, in part because among Protestants, the Virgin came to symbolize all that they were protesting about Catholicism. Still, notwithstanding pervasive American anti-Catholicism, 19th century Protestants like Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, could write approvingly of Mary as an exemplar of femininity, maternity, and domesticity. Recent decades have seen tentative steps to bring Mary back into the Protestant fold. As for Catholics, at the mid-16th century Council of Trent, the Catholic Church reaffirmed its devotion to the Virgin, largely dismissing the Reformers' objections. Catholic allegiance to the Virgin rose to unprecedented heights of ardor with the promotion of new pilgrimage sites like Lourdes in France, and with the triumphant papal proclamations of Mary's Immaculate Conception in 1854 and Assumption into Heaven in 1950. For a glimpse into the kaleidoscopic variety of Marian traditions, let us consider two images. I could have chosen famous artworks like Michelangelo's Pietà or Raphael's Sistine Madonna, but two less renowned and highly contrasting sculptures will provide an entry into many of the big issues about Mary that this book will discuss. The first, Mary of the Miraculous Medal, originated in 1830 France, Figure 1. The second is 2005's The Virgin Mother, by British artist Damien Hirst, Figure 2. Both are metal sculptures, but otherwise they seem to come from different planets. And not just because one is a miniature relief and the other a freestanding figure 33 feet, 10 meters high. Nevertheless, together they reveal an array of long-standing and traditional beliefs regarding the Virgin Mary. Mary of the Miraculous Medal can be considered the prototype of the submissive stereotype. The composition was inspired by the earliest of many high-profile modern apparitions of the Virgin that included Lourdes, 1858, Fatima in Portugal, 1917, and Medjugorje in Bosnia-Herzegovina, 1981 to present. In 1830, Catholic visionary Catherine Labouré reported that the Virgin had dictated to her every detail of a new medal, including the motto, "Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who turn to you." The phrase, "conceived without sin," proclaims Mary's Immaculate Conception, a doctrine centered on the belief that from the moment of her conception, Mary was freed from all sin, including the original sin Christians believe humans inherited from Adam and Eve. Since the Council of Trent, This abstract doctrine has been visualized in the Roman Catholic world, just as we see on the medal, by the solitary figure of Mary in the heavens. Mary's downcast eyes, in fact, signaled not only humility, but purity, especially sexual purity. Early Christian writers linked the power of sight with sexual desire, and advised devout virgins, both male and female, to preserve their virtue by averting their eyes from temptation. Immaculate Conception iconography also surrounded Mary with the rays of light featured on the medal, an allusion to the woman clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet and crowned with 12 stars, described in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 1. Intended by the first-century author of Revelation as a personification of Israel, this visionary woman, framed in celestial light, came to symbolize the Church, and later was associated with the Virgin Mary's Assumption and coronation as Queen of Heaven. The medal thus glorifies Mary in her role as exalted and transcendent Queen. At the same time, the second half of the medal's motto, "Pray for us who turn to you," links Mary the lofty sovereign with her human subjects. The motto is symbolized most palpably by Mary's cloak and her open hands. In the medieval tradition of the Mater Misericordiae, the Mother of Mercies shelters her suppliants in the folds of her cloak and intercedes with Christ in heaven on their behalf. Tradition dictates that Mary's motherhood gives her unique persuasive power with Jesus. Much earlier, in the Byzantine era, Mary's cloak itself possessed special protective powers as one of the first Marian miracle-working relics. Finally, Mary stands barefoot on a globe encircled by a snake. The snake symbolizes Satan, whose power over the world is crushed underfoot by Mary as the new Eve, untarnished by original sin. Starting with the New Testament writings of Paul, the Adam and Eve story signified disaster for all humans that could only be repaired by Jesus' atoning death on the cross. For Paul, Jesus was the new Adam, and within a century, Mary was identified as the corresponding new Eve. The 2nd century church father Justin Martyr maintained that the Virgin Eve's deadly blunder in succumbing to Satan in the Garden of Eden had been reversed when the Virgin Mary said yes to the angel Gabriel. "Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." Luke, chapter 1, verse 38. Thus, Mary of the Miraculous Medal presents a paradoxical tension between Mary as humble young girl, remote Queen of Heaven, and vigilant advocate for those who call upon her. Yet there is one aspect of Mary's identity, one might even call it her signature role, that the medal acknowledges only indirectly: her motherhood. Mary's motherhood is front and center in Damien Hirst's The Virgin Mother. No less than the Miraculous Medal, the Virgin Mother reflects a broad range of Marian traditions and theological doctrines, all of them based on Mary's motherhood. Indeed, every visually disturbing aspect of the figure, the nude and pregnant body whose womb shelters an embryo, the physicality expressed in outsized scale, the flayed skin peeled back to reveal sinews, bone, and arteries, even the erect nipples that echo the upward tilt of the Virgin's glance. All these elements derive from traditional, long-held Christian beliefs about the Mother of Jesus. In a real sense, what Hirst has created with the Virgin Mother is a complex sermon about Mary that challenges believers to confront the implications of essential Christian beliefs. The most shocking attribute of the Virgin Mother is probably her nudity. The sexual connotations of the nude female figure here fly in the face of traditional ideas about Mary's purity. After all, tradition dictates that Mary's body be covered from head to foot. Furthermore, given taboos around displaying nude pregnant bodies, the fact that this nude is also pregnant makes the figure all the more disturbing. Yet, the Virgin Mother's pregnant nudity pronounces Mary's freedom from original sin, the principle at the core of the miraculous medal. The Virgin Mother, like the miraculous medal, proclaims Mary as the new Eve. In Christian tradition, after Adam and Eve's disobedience, nudity became the embodied symbol of humanity's shame, sin, and inclination toward Satan. If Mary is the new Eve, who by giving birth to Jesus participates in the restoration of human perfection, then the naked, the Virgin Mother, reminds Christian viewers that before the onset of sin, before the disobedience in the garden, nudity symbolized the perfection of God's human creatures. The Virgin Mother's nudity expresses the perfect intimacy that Adam and Eve enjoyed with God in Eden. After all, in their face-to-face encounters with God, they were completely naked. As the fetus enclosed in the Virgin Mother's willing womb, Jesus promises restored intimacy between God and humans. Despite its scale and its unconventional composition, the Virgin Mother emerges from the same devotional tradition that inspired so many images of the Madonna and Child. Wonderingly, the Virgin Mother rests a protective hand over her swollen belly, with the same gesture made by visibly pregnant Renaissance, Del Parto, about to give birth, virgins, most famously Piero della Francesca's Madonna del Parto of 1467. Hurst's seemingly transgressive portrayal of Jesus as a fetus in the womb, rather than a baby in his mother's arms, is the artist's way of shaking the viewer out of complacence. Even here, however, the Virgin Mother has precedence. In Byzantine renderings of the Panagia Platytera, Greek, all holy one, more spacious than the heavens, a tiny figure of the infant Jesus looks out from his mother's womb. And from at least the 12th century, artists gave Mary a transparent womb in two familiar scenes: the Annunciation, when Gabriel announces the news of Jesus to Mary, and the Visitation, when Mary visits her cousin Elizabeth to celebrate their miraculous pregnancies. The Virgin Mother demands that viewers confront the theological magnitude of Mary's motherhood, which was the basis of her earliest official Christian title, Theotokos, Greek for the one who gives birth to God. The 4th century poet Ephraim of Syria, addressing Jesus in his Nativity hymn 11, exclaims in wonder, "The womb of your mother overthrew the order of all." The sculpture's unmistakably human baby points to a cornerstone of Christian belief, that Jesus was God incarnate, a term that comes from the Latin word for flesh, carnis, and means enfleshed. In other words, Jesus had to become incarnated as human in order to deliver humans from sin. Thus, besides sinlessness and the promise of reconciliation between God and humans, the Virgin Mother's nudity and her fetus accentuate the humanity of Mary and Jesus. Jesus' divinity comes from God the Father, but Jesus' humanity came from his human mother, Mary, a fact inescapably emphasized by the Virgin Mother's hyper-real flayed skin. While on a superficial level, this is the artist's homage to the popular visible man and visible woman anatomical models of the 1960s, the statue's lifelike flesh and blood foreshadow the price that, each in their own way, Jesus and his mother are fated to pay. In the words of Saint Catherine of Siena, writing in the 14th century about Mary and Jesus at the crucifixion, "O sweetest love, this was the sword that struck your mother's heart and soul. The Son was physically pierced, and so was his mother, since his flesh was hers. This was only right, since that flesh was her own. He had taken his flesh from her." From the 1st century to the 21st century, Christians have often ignored or forgotten the Christian belief that unless Jesus was fully human with all its limitations, his death could not bring about human salvation. This comes through in the earliest known reference to Jesus' mother outside the Gospels. In the early 2nd century, Ignatius of Antioch attacked certain Christian groups who denied that Jesus could have been human. This first Christian heresy was called Docetism, from the Greek, to seem. Docetists believed Jesus only seemed human because, they argued, if Jesus were truly human with all the physical indignities that go with a human body, then he could not have been truly divine. To the contrary, Ignatius insisted on the ultimately winning position that Jesus was divine and human. After all, wrote Ignatius in his letter to the Trallians, Jesus was carried in the womb, even as we are, for the usual period of time, and was really born, as we also are, and was, in reality, nourished with milk, and partook of common meat and drink, even as we do. Ignatius' observation that Jesus suckled at his mother's breasts aligns with Hurst's accentuation of the Virgin Mother's breasts. As the concept of Jesus nursing at his mother's breast acquired theological significance, the subject became the focus of countless homilies, sermons, hymns, and poems. By the 7th century, artists took up the theme, and images of the Virgin lactans, Latin, nursing, began to appear. The earliest examples are preserved in the cells of Egyptian monks, painted as aids to meditation. The image flourished for another 800 years, until the Council of Trent suppressed it. Other important beliefs coalesced around Mary's breasts. For example, they betokened Mary's power of intercession. Because Jesus drew life from Mary's breasts, he could not deny her requests. Milk from Mary's breasts also took on immense sanctity in the form of relics, to which pilgrims flocked from all over Europe. In 1511, seeking the Virgin's aid for their infant son, King Henry VIII and Queen Catherine of Aragon traveled to the great English Marian pilgrimage shrine of Walsingham, whose high altar was crowned by a vial of Mary's milk. The Virgin Mother may also disturb viewers because she is so young. UNICEF has declared that marriage before the age of 18 is a fundamental violation of human rights, yet the Virgin Mother looks scarcely old enough to have entered puberty. For better or worse, Christian tradition and actual 1st century Jewish marital practice suggest that the historical Mary would have conceived Jesus at a very young age, younger even than the prototype for the Virgin Mother, Edgar Degas' beloved 1881 sculpture, Little Dancer of 14 Years. The youth of the Virgin Mother is also a reminder of the Immaculate Conception, reflecting the Council of Trent's mandate that Mary of the Immaculate Conception be a girl of 12 or 13. For council members, Mary's youth constituted not just historical truth, but a sign of her bodily purity. As anthropologists have shown, youth and virginity are often associated with visionary gifts of unmediated access to the divine. Notably, then, unlike the Little Dancer or the miraculous medal, Mary's eyes are wide open as she gazes upward, as if her encounter with the angel Gabriel has alerted her to some new dimension of sight and sound. The sheer size of Hurst's The Virgin Mother may also seem unusual because, excluding Byzantine apse mosaics, images of the Virgin Mary traditionally have ranged from miniature, like the miraculous medal, to slightly over life-sized. Nevertheless, the Virgin Mother recalls the enormous Mary statues erected in Catholic locales across the globe since the mid-20th century. Explanations for this phenomenon are complex, including the Virgin's close association with anti-communism during the Cold War. But giant-sized Mary statues are often right-wing declarations of resistance to Vatican II efforts to rein in what the Council deemed excessive devotion to the Virgin, and by extension, rejection of religious and political liberalization. Size has always played a role in religious and secular visual propaganda. Art historians call this hierarchical scale, the bigger the figure, the more powerful its subject. The Virgin Mother's scale and title call to mind the ancient virgin goddess Athena and her colossal ivory and gold statue in the Parthenon of Athens. Athena's size reflected the ancient belief that gods and goddesses far exceeded humans in size. Every branch of Christianity insists that Mary is not a goddess, but this is a fine distinction that everyday piety often ignores. In her monumentality, the Virgin Mother conjures up not just ancient goddesses, but Mary herself as the invincible virgin warrior who drove attackers from the walls of Constantinople in the 7th century, and was hailed in the Greek Orthodox akathistos hymn as our leader in battle and defender. These two artworks express the Marian contradiction between weakness and power, as well as the complex history of Marian beliefs. Today, the Virgin is still a role model for millions, but alone of all her sex, as mother and virgin at the same time. The Virgin Mary is also a figure who, as feminists point out, real women can never hope to emulate. Feminists contend that devotion to the Virgin has encouraged Christian women and men to take a negative attitude toward the human body. At the same time, liberation theology embraces the Virgin as one who fights injustice through her powers of intercession and is devoted to the poor in the here and now. Ultimately, Mary is the woman whose flesh and blood guarantees the foundations of Christian theology. So much from a girl first encountered ever so briefly in the Bible. Chapter 2. Mary in the New Testament, History, and Earliest Christianity. Any survey of the Virgin Mary and her role in Christianity necessarily begins with Mary in the New Testament, the earliest source to mention her. The New Testament is the essential starting point for Mary's place in Christianity, but only the starting point. This chapter will introduce two key factors in the development of Marian beliefs: the evolution of Christian doctrine over time and God's plan of salvation. Finally, while the New Testament provides the earliest information about Mary, we will find out that it does not amount to very much. The chapter closes with an attempt to describe the real life, or, in historians' terms, the historical Mary, based not just on the New Testament, but also on relevant archaeological and historical data. The New Testament, Historical and Literary Perspectives. Christianity arose out of the life and ministry of Jesus of Nazareth, a Jew crucified around 30 CE by the Romans for sedition against the Roman Empire, but whose followers claimed he had risen from the dead. For the first generation of what scholars call the Jesus movement, Jesus' resurrection signaled the imminent end of the world. According to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 13, verses 30 and 26, Jesus promised his followers, "This generation will not pass away before they see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory." What would be the point, then, of documenting the life of Jesus, much less planning for anything but the Last Judgment, when Christ would return to earth? We can see this attitude in Paul's letters, which predate the Gospels and which concentrate on Christ's death, resurrection, and second coming, but say nothing about Jesus' life, miracles, or teaching. Only when it became obvious that the end was not yet near did Jesus' second-generation followers take up their pens to record the life of Jesus. with occasional references to his mother Mary.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?